Welcome everyone to the Using Local Housing Data Tool webinar. My name is Gabriela Alvera Suare, and I'm a planner with local planning assistance in community development at the Met Council. And today's webinar will be led by Maya Guerrero Combs, a planning analyst with the Housing and Livable Communities Act team in community development. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Maya.
Thanks. Okay, so hopefully you're all in the right place. We're here today to talk about the local housing data tool. And so thank you for the introduction. As Gabby mentioned, my name is Maya Guerrero Combs. I work here at the Met Council in the Community Development Division on the Housing and Policy team. And I'm excited to show you one of the housing technical assistance tools the Met Council has been developing to support local governments in completing their 2050 local comprehensive plans. So today we will be exploring the first in a suite of housing technical assistance tools that the Met Council is developing, our application, the Local Housing Data Tool. So before we dive into the tool itself, I wanted to provide some context about which of the 2050 housing minimum requirements the Local Housing Data Tool will focus on. If you've taken a look at the 2050 housing minimum requirements, you'll notice that there are three distinct sections. Today, we will largely be focusing on the existing housing needs portion of the minimum requirements and how the local housing data tool can help you meet those minimum requirements. So the existing housing needs requirements are composed of two main parts. The first is a local existing housing data assessment. So this is where we ask local governments to provide data on existing conditions of housing and households in their city or township. We ask that at minimum, this assessment include the listed data points, but we encourage cities to go beyond the minimum required data. The second part of the existing housing needs section is asking local governments to use the assessment data to identify the existing housing needs specific to their city or township. By completing the existing housing data assessment, local governments should be able to identify housing gaps and needs within their community, but we encourage going beyond just data by using local knowledge, priorities, goals, engagement, and other sources to inform the identification of housing needs. There are also three regional existing housing needs that are required to be considered by local governments in their narrative section. Those three regional housing needs are affordable housing that is accessible to persons of varying abilities, the maintenance and preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, and households at risk of or experiencing housing instability. The tool we will talk about today will provide the minimum required data in the first column, as well as contextual data around accessible housing, senior housing needs, and housing instability. While we will have a lot of time for questions today, the focus of this presentation will largely be on the data requirements of this section, and so questions around the data assessment and tool will be prioritized. Although please feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions about the housing minimum requirements and I don't get to them today. So diving into some background, for those of you who completed the existing housing data assessment in 2040, you may remember that the Met Council provided the minimum required data needed in a PDF that then never really got updated throughout the decade. So while this PDF got the data into the hands of local government staff, it became evident that some improvements could definitely be made. So in spring of 2025, the Met Council conducted a series of user feedback sessions for the local planning handbook website and materials as a whole. One of the key feedback areas we heard was that the housing element technical assistance experience just overall needed to improve. And then specific to the existing housing data assessment, we heard that the PDF format was clunky, it was hard to copy and paste values from. We heard that there was no clear direction to how the data related to the minimum requirements in the PDF. It wasn't clear why these data points were important or connected to housing policy and planning. And also that this data was really useful, but only if it's updated on a regular basis. Additionally, Met Council staff did a targeted review of 2040 comprehensive plans to identify how local governments ended up using this data. This review identified that beyond the minimum required data points, local governments also commonly included trend data over time, charts and visualizations, and additional common data points such as age of housing stock. So, incorporating all that feedback led Met Council staff to develop the Local Housing Data Tool. So, the Local Housing Data Tool is an interactive web-based tool that provides data, visualizations, and context for the existing conditions of housing and households at the local level. This will help local governments complete their 2050 minimum requirements and more. The interactive allows users to quickly download both the minimum required data and additional contextual data quickly and in a spreadsheet format. The local housing data tool also allows users to explore this data in the context of county and regional values, look at trends over time, and have explanations of how to interpret this data to identify various housing needs. The tool will also plug into our housing toolkit, which will be launched later in 2026. The housing toolkit will have suggested strategies and actions local governments can take to meet the identified housing needs in their community. So, we can move on to the most important, right? Which is a live demonstration of the local housing data tool. In this live demonstration, I'm not going to go through every single chart that's in the data tool, but I will cover how to use the tool, how to download the minimum required data, and an overview of the data provided. And so give me 1 second as I switch over from these slides and into the tool. This is the homepage for the local housing data tool. We do have a banner indicating that the tool is still under construction. We expect to add and improve features through fall of this year, especially as we add to our suite of technical assistance tools, including the housing toolkit. So you can always check this banner for any updates throughout the year. At the bottom of the page, we have a little explanation of what this tool does and what it's used for, as well as when the data is updated. In the explanation of what this tool is for, we indicate that the data provided in this tool is for existing conditions, and any information on projected growth or future need for affordable housing can be found in the local planning handbook community pages, which we link to in the explanation. We expect to update the data in this tool once a year, most likely between January and March, really depending on ACS data updates as well as other data releases. So to begin downloading and exploring data, click this large button and then just select your desired city and township from the dropdown and press the Go to Data button. I have to say, I looked at who signed up and I saw that Elise from Chaska did. So I'm so sorry, Chaska. You are going to be the demonstration for this tool. Sorry, my apologies. So go ahead and press the Go to Data button, and that'll take you immediately to the option to download data. So selecting the Download Data button right here will take you to a landing page where you can download a spreadsheet tailored to the selected city or township. Within that spreadsheet, there's going to be 4 tabs. There's going to be a tab of how to use this data, a tab that just contains the minimum required data points, and then a tab of supplemental trend data, which will have all the data that is in this tool. And then the final tab will have metadata. So it'll have all the data sources as well as explanations and links to where those are located. If you would like to also, so this is just if you want to quickly download the data. If you'd like to also explore the data in the tool, you'll find 5 tabs here with various subject areas, or you can navigate to these subject areas with the tab at the top. At the bottom of this page, we have an explanation of how to use some of the common interactive features that you're going to find throughout the data tool. So with that, we will get started with housing stock. So on each page, the header will tell you which city or township you have selected. If you wish to select a different municipality, just click the Select an Area tab, which will bring you back to the home page and that drop-down menu. At the top of each page in each section, you'll find buttons indicating the various subjects of data on the page, and you can click those to jump to a specific subject area. In various charts in this tool, you will see a toggle button right here, which will allow you to see the data displayed in the chart in a table format. To do that, just click the toggle. I swear it normally works. Sorry. And that'll bring you to the table view. And if you want to go back to the chart view, just click it again. In some of the charts, there's also a minimum requirements button. Selecting this button will bring up a pop-up explaining what data in this chart meets a specific minimum requirement. Selecting the red X will exit the pop-up. Not all charts have this button because not all charts have the minimum required data. So those that do will have this button. And finally, on all charts, you're going to see an export chart button. This is a feature that is coming soon, but it will allow users to select the visuals and data from the specific chart that they wish to download in Excel and visual format. Throughout the tool, narrative and context is provided, as well as suggestions on how to interpret the data to identify housing needs. Additionally, at the bottom of each section, there's a little section called Suggested Local Housing Needs and Actions. And so this area will have potential needs the data can indicate and will eventually link to our housing toolkit, which is coming later this year. And that toolkit will have actions and strategies that local governments can implement to meet various housing needs. So on this first housing stock tab, you're going to find all housing stock units by housing type, so single family, multifamily, manufactured housing, etc. You're going to see that housing unit type changes over time. You're also going to see permitted housing units over time by type. And on many charts, you can isolate variables. So you could look at just multifamily, and that allows you to drill into the data, as well as compare values to county values to look at trends. And then finally, on this page, we're also going to have age of housing stock data. So broken out by year built and also median built year and with regional and county context. The next tab is going to be the housing stock affordability. So this tab contains housing unit affordability data, and it'll focus on housing stock and its relative affordability based on area median income. So this section is going to begin with an explanation of regional area median income, or AMI. Then it'll have the median income of the municipality relative to regional AMI values. Then all housing units broken out by affordability. And you can always hover and see additional data in the tooltip. Move into all housing units broken out by whether they're rental, ownership, or manufactured housing and their affordability levels. And then you'll dial into rental. There's a section just on rental housing. So all rental housing units broken out by affordability, rental units by affordability over time, average rents by bedroom size and vacancy rates. And then same thing, we're going to have owner occupied housing broken out by affordability levels and over time. And then median sale prices over time compared to county median sale prices. And then finally, we're going to have a section. Then we have permitted housing units by affordability. So you can look and see of those housing units that were permitted, what affordability level were they at? And then finally, a section on dedicated affordable housing that looks at publicly subsidized housing units. The next tab is going to be households and demographics. So that's going to have most of your household information. There's going to be a lot on this page. So you're going to have households by race and ethnicity, households by age, average household size, and then diving into households by income level. So here we have all households by income compared to all housing units at those affordability levels. You can compare housing stock to the households. And then we're breaking those households up by whether they own or rent. So just total households by tenure. I preloaded these pages. That's probably why it's giving me trouble. And then you can dial into households by whether they own or rent. And then you can select these and go get a little bit more specific on households who rent, compare those to county shares, by income. So we can see, so here, we dialed into rental households and then the shares of those rental households by income level. And then you can compare those shares to county values to add some context. And then you can explore households who own. Continuing on to drill into households who rent, this will be a section specifically for that. This will look at renter households by income over time, and then renter households by age. So you can see changes in renter household age demographics over time. Then a section on older households, and a section of households living with a disability, and households experiencing housing insecurity. Great. The next tab will focus on households who are cost burden. So we're going to have overall households that are cost burden, and then cost burden by racial or ethnic group, cost burden households by age, cost burden households by whether they rent or own their home, and then cost burden households by income level, focusing primarily on lower and moderate income households. And then this one has all households in these income levels and all housing units in these income levels, and then the households at those income levels that are housing cost burden in order to better get at gaps in affordable housing supply. Okay. And then our final tab focuses on homeownership. So we have overall homeownership rates, and then right here, and then broken out by race and ethnicity. And you can compare those to county values as well. And then our final section is we have a section that looks at how many moderate income renter households in the municipality could afford, based on income and savings, an entry-level ownership home if given the opportunity, either through a typical down payment assistance program or a typical land trust model opportunity. And I want to clarify that these numbers are just identifying households who could afford these opportunities. They don't take into account desire for ownership or feasibility in providing these opportunities. They're just here to give local governments context when setting goals around affordable ownership opportunities. So that's going to wrap up the live demonstration of the tool. I do want to show you all where to find this. You're probably wondering. So you're going to be able to find this on the local planning handbook site. So if you go to the local planning handbook site and you go to the required plan elements housing, in the minimum requirements, you will see for the existing housing needs portion, it'll be linked right here.
Yeah, thanks, Maya, for your presentation. This is such a great tool. I'm so excited for everyone to be able to use it.